lot of controversy going on these days about race, gender, defining male, female, woman, man. We're not going to get too heavily into that. What I wanted to do today on the Out of the Box podcast is talk with a young woman with regards to her perspective on things. Now, I want you to keep this in mind. This is a very young person. She's in middle school, which if you're in Canada, you know what that is, especially in Western Canada. So this would be ages from, what is it, your school, from 12?
10.
10 to 14, 15?
14?
14?
Yeah,
because you're in grade 7.
Yeah.
Right? Now, it may seem kind of odd to actually have a young person like this, but we got talking a little while ago, and I was really kind of taken aback by her clarity on different things, and I thought, this would be a great podcast because we do get a lot of young people listening, and I think there's a lot of identity issues that go along with it.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, you are 13.
I am.
She's on the podcast with a big fluffy bunny
Yes.
on her lap. What's the bunny's name?
This is Cinnamon.
Cinnamon.
My little fluffy bun.
Okay. Now, how do you define yourself?
Like in race?
Yep.
I'm mixed.
Mixed?
Yeah.
So mixed as in
Like black and white.
black and white, mocha.
Mocha, yeah.
Yeah. And how does that play into when you're at school? Like, how accepting are people of you?
It depends who it is, but a lot of people now, I feel like are more understanding because there is a lot of more black people in Canada. But
And what about in your school? Like Lethbridge is ideally, it's like a conservative community.
yeah. Well, in my school, there isn't a lot of skin colors like me, and not a lot of black people, but there still is a lot. And you just see a lot more white people, which sometimes hurts, but...
Yeah. Okay, so why does it hurt? Like, I know last year you went through some stuff. Do you want to share that?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I did go through some stuff. I've got called really bad names for my skin color, like poo head or something like that.
Pooh head.
Something like that.
Yeah. Any other ones?
Well, a monkey is a
Yeah.
common one.
That's
in middle
really
school.
bad.
It is, and I don't think a lot of people understand what that means, especially since we're all in middle school, but I feel like they should understand that it's really disrespectful to my culture.
Yeah. And do they teach tolerance in the school?
Yeah, but like a lot of kids just don't listen.
Yeah.
And some teachers just don't do a lot about racism. Like they
Yeah.
just like give up.
And why do you think that is?
Because kids just, I don't think they understand how important like different skin colors are and how
Yeah.
much they mean to people.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it's really important to you.
Yeah.
I mean, because your mama's white
Yeah.
and your biological father is darker because he's Trinidadian and
Yeah.
Chinese,
Yeah.
right? And so you have kind of the perfect combination of skin color from both, right?
Yeah.
What is the difference from last year to this year? Like, you were younger last year, you were in grade 6,
Yeah.
but the bullying was bad.
It was because I was scared to stick up for myself because there was just a whole bunch of girls that were white in
Yeah.
my grade that would bully me for my skin color and for who I was.
Yeah.
Compared to this year, I show how strong I am and I show my culture, and a lot of people respect me for that.
Yeah. It's quite a difference.
It is, yeah.
Quite a difference. Now, in the school, do they have any policies? We'll move away from the bullying part for right now. Do they have any policies on tolerance as far as gender identification is concerned? I know it's middle school.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any transgender? Do they talk about tolerance, understanding? Do they teach that at all?
Well, they do say they, them. Like, if we're explaining, like, we'll write your name in pink if you're a girl, or write your name in blue if you're a boy. And they'll be like, or just grab a random color if you don't identify as one of them. So they say that, but it's not, like, a known thing. Like, they don't really talk about it
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a lot of intolerance going on YouTube and on other social media, especially around, we talked about this before. You know who Dylan Mulvaney is?
Yeah.
Okay. So they just celebrated 365 days as a woman.
Yes.
So transgender, right?
Yes.
And so Nike is now using her, they, them as, and I don't know how she refers to herself.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're using her as a spokesperson for their athletic
Yeah.
equipment, clothing, and Bud Light is also having her as a representative of their product,
Yeah.
because she is. I mean, she's trending.
Yes.
You know, she's
yeah.
what do you call that again? She's got millions and millions of
She's
viewers.
viral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
she's-
it's unbelievable. But then now you have guys like Kid Rock blowing up Bud Light cans, and
Yeah.
and there's this huge thing where people are, they're drinking Bud Light, and all of a sudden they're wearing feminine clothing, and they're just like, I
Yeah.
really like the taste of Bud Light, and next thing you know, they're painting their nails, and they're
Yeah.
just making fun of the whole thing.
Yes.
What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think for like the sport part of it, that they should have not really considered her as it, because women have worked really, really hard for their title in sports, and they should have used a real athlete. In my perspective, they
Yeah.
really should have. I think it's really disrespectful to women who've worked for their title in sports. For the Bud Light, I haven't like really got a lot of knowledge on that, so like I don't know. I don't really know what to think about it. I just think it's like weird. It's not like something I would like see out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, and of course because your age too. I think the thing that, and I was talking with a mutual friend of ours,
Yeah.
and I said, the problem I have with Dylan Mulvaney, and this is, I got chastised for this, is that it doesn't make sense to me. It is like almost forcing this ideology of transgenderism on you, when transgender, yes, it's a part of our population now
Yeah.
and everything like that, but it's such a small population,
Yeah, yeah.
and I mean, I remember going out and doing my hypnosis shows, and in all the thousands of people I saw, I came across only two transgender people. One was in
Yeah.
high school, and one was a teacher at a local school, local middle school, not yours. And of course, I'm all for being yourself.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that got me was, now there's the whole thing where, okay, well, my dog likes pink, so I want to transition my dog to a female dog,
That is
because
so wrong.
that's an extreme. And then my friend said, well, why do we have to have male and female? Why do we have to have gender? Why can't we just be all they and them?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, ever since I've been born, I've only known male and female. It's just been a thing ever since I was born.
Yeah.
So like when people say they them, it doesn't make sense, because there really is only two genders. Like even if you're transitioning, like you're male or female. Like,
Yeah.
They them, like what does that mean? Like what is that? I just don't get it.
Yeah. Do you see it causing a problem? For example, in your school,
Yeah.
they give you the option, okay, pink for girls and blue for boys. And that's really, really traditional.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people see it as a huge problem. Like, why do we have to have the male and female? But you're also given a choice of they, them.
Yeah.
But, you said it right there. This is all you've ever known. And
Yeah.
you're 13 years old.
Yeah.
Now, as you grow, you're going to see, more of this stuff.
Yeah.
But they don't teach it at all in school.
No, they don't. They just mention it, like if we're doing something like gym activities or something, because
Yeah.
we'll split up into teams like that.
Yeah. Now, on your basketball team, you
Yeah.
have boys and girls.
On mine, no, it's just girls.
Just girls.
Yeah.
Okay. How would you feel if a boy who identified as a girl or a woman
Yeah.
played basketball on your team or was playing on a team against you? How would you feel about that?
Well, if they're playing on a team against me, I would respect them way more, just because I feel like they know that males have way more, like, testosterone.
Yeah, testosterone, yeah.
Yeah. So they can, like, do a whole bunch more than women, kind of, when it comes to, like, body
Yeah.
stuff.
So you said you'd respect them more?
Yeah, because if someone transitioned into, like, a female that was a male, I would have no problem with it. But joining a sports team, they would be ahead of, like, probably every girl.
Yeah.
And that would definitely bring down myself and probably my other teammates as well.
Yeah. So your concept of it wouldn't be fair.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to mention at this point in time, too, the whole point of this podcast is to get an opinion of a young person as they see the world. This is
Yeah.
not about right or wrong. This is about how you see yourself
Yeah.
in this whole school situation.
Yeah.
And you identify as a woman.
Yeah.
And you identify basically as a woman who is a, maturing female,
Yeah.
right? And you have many friends who are boys.
Yeah.
They're becoming men,
Yes.
which is biologically that is a grown male.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense like that, right?
Yeah.
And you find that there's some confusion in others. Like when you guys go on TikTok or you go on social media and you see all of this stuff,
Yeah.
do you think it's confusing for young people, or do you think it's, hey, let's let everyone be whoever they want to be?
I think it's both, to be honest, because a lot of people do get confused, but then some, even like mature adults, take it way too far. Way
Yeah.
too far.
Give me an example of way too far.
Well, like saying the dog thing, like that's just like
Yeah.
a lot. Or like trying to like force someone, like you should believe in this and you should think this is right and this is wrong, especially when they're adults. Like that's just messed up. And you're like, when we're so young, it's so confusing to us because we don't know like what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, your mom loves you so much and would support you in anything like that.
Yeah.
And traditionally, mom and dad's roles are to parent till, roughly about the age of 14 or so,
Yeah.
to give you those guidelines. And then after 14, you should know everything you need to know. And then the parents just give you guidelines.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're younger, so you're 5 years old, and your parents are transgender,
Yeah.
then is it correct? And this is going to be this is really controversial. Is it correct for them to raise you like they are? Or is it more correct for them to raise you with tolerance and let you find your own way?
Let them, like, they should raise you to find your own way because you don't want to be forced to be someone who you really aren't. And I just think that you should let your kid just do what they really want, especially when it comes to their identity. Just because you're transgender doesn't mean your kids have to.
Yeah. Okay. Let's draw a parallel between that and race if we can.
Okay.
Because I know when you were little, right? I mean, predominantly everyone around you was white,
Yeah.
right? And you didn't really start drawing that identity of your, basically your darker skinned father until you were how old?
11, 10?
11 or 10, right?
Yeah.
And then it became really a cultural thing for you,
Yes.
right? From music, to attitude, everything like that.
Yes.
Right? What was the appeal with that?
Reconnecting with my father
Yeah.
and learning more about our culture and noticing how much disrespect my color of skin or darker color of skin gets compared to white people. And I've always been the darkest in one side of my family, so it's always been like, well, I respect white people, of course, but I don't respect racism at
Yeah.
all. And I feel like everyone should have a say for their culture, no matter what, because it's their culture. It's like what they're trying to like say that it's special to them in a way, because like just because our skin color is darker than yours doesn't mean anything.
You're right. You're right. It doesn't. And this comes down to the point of identity.
Yeah.
How do we define ourselves? So I asked this question earlier. How do you define yourself? If you want to say, here's my name is only part of the picture, how do you define yourself? If you wanted me to describe you to somebody else as this good person, this young person, how would I best describe you? What information would you give me that I could then pass on?
I would give you that I'm mixed, that I have darker skin than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would you throw some other things in with that?
That I'm a woman
Yeah.
and that I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
Because those things are important to me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And of course, you're obviously very intelligent,
Thank you.
right? What do you see for the future for yourself? You're welcome, by the way.
I see a firefighter career
Yeah.
for myself, which is a lot of people get surprised, especially males, because you don't see a lot of women doing that. But I fight for what I want, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Good on you. And that fight comes from obviously, your mom,
Yes.
your leading role model. So moving forward with this, in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, okay, as you move from teen into your 20s,
Yeah.
what do you see for yourself, and where do you think this whole idea of recognizing transgender, but also recognizing, because I've heard people on YouTube, for example, and you can go into this however you want to go into it,
Yeah.
where they say, well, what is a woman? What is a woman in North America? And the host of the program will say, okay, how do you define a woman?
Yeah.
And we said this before. A woman is defined as a mature female, biological female. That's
Yes.
a woman. Okay. Now, this other group of people will say, well, there's so many different ways to define a woman. And I realize maybe we're getting a little bit too complicated here.
Yeah.
There will come a time when somebody will ask you to define that.
Oh, yeah.
And then, how do you go forward with that? If you're 20 years old, and we know that this whole situation is going to evolve, and just see if you
Yeah.
can kind of put your mind in that area, where would you stand? Because right now you say, yeah, there's male and female.
Yeah.
You were raised that way. They're male and female, and
Correct.
you be whoever you want to be. Now you're 20 years old, and this whole hopefully tolerance and open-mindedness goes to an extreme. Where do you see yourself then as defining male and female?
I think I would personally think the same, because I've been very strong about like those type of things, because I feel like people, like, if you ask someone to define what a they them is, they stutter. On YouTube you can see a whole bunch of those.
Yeah.
And it confuses me, because I'm like, well, like, what, that word is like something that you would say in a sentence.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah. Do you feel it messes up our ability, because as people we have an identity?
Yeah.
Like, for example, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a friend, I'm compassionate, I'm a therapist, I'm a hypnotist. I love doing these podcasts. I love
Yeah.
helping people.
Yeah.
That's how I define myself, not only by my name, whichever you know me by, Jim, Jimmy, James, JR, whatever. I've got so many of them. That's my identity, and
Yeah.
I define myself as a male. I think my big concern is, as we move forward, people get so sensitive to it that they become offended
Yeah.
if you say he or she.
Yeah, which I don't think that it's someone's fault for like assuming that you might be a male or female. Like, I think you should definitely be able to correct them and say it in a polite way, because
Yeah.
a lot of, especially young kids, wouldn't
Yeah.
really notice, especially if you're transgender, right? And someone known you as male their whole life, but you went to a female and they're still little. That can be also really confusing.
Yeah.
But when I like hear that, I'm like, well, there's still only two genders. There's only male and female. Like, you're
Yeah.
just switching.
Yeah. And and I always think when I go out and do a hypnosis show, I
Yeah.
want to be as respectful as possible, especially
Yeah.
when I'm going into schools.
Yeah.
And I was at a small town high school in Saskatchewan, and I was doing a show. This is years ago.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. The tolerance in the school was amazing. Okay. And I was looking for one more girl
Yeah.
to come on the show. Mm-hmm. And by the way, when I say girl, woman, or whatever, I am not disrespecting. You're transgender and you're listening to this. This is not to be disrespectful at all. It is to say that I was confused.
Yeah.
So there I'm standing on stage, and there was a transgender person
Yeah.
in the back, identified as a woman.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, we need one more woman on the stage, one more guy on the stage. And so this person puts their hand up.
Yeah.
And I said, boy, girl,
Yeah.
And boy, girl, and she came up, and obviously it was a transgender male,
Yeah.
and so, and I was concerned. I'm like, wow, like it takes a lot of guts to come up and be in a hypnosis show
Yes.
where, and the person was First Nations as well, and was
Yeah.
the only First Nation person in that grade, that school, that event that I was doing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was mind blowing. And I look back on it now, and of course now I would do things differently.
Yeah.
But for them being in the show, I had real concerns.
Yeah.
Like how do I handle this properly and everything, and I kind of stopped, and I'm like, well, wait, just do the show. Don't be concerned about it.
Yeah.
And I think we get to the point where can we just do things? Because obviously, I mean, as you grow older, and Lethbridge, where we're based out of, has a very large and productive gay community.
Yeah.
And many of them are good friends of mine. And how do we move forward and still be respectful, or how do we move forward and just be? Like, can we? Because of course there's so much contention out there right now, and
Yeah.
you're seeing it on YouTube. How would you do it?
I would just have my boundaries, and I would respect people, but also if they're having like a debate, I would say what I think, in my opinion, because my opinion matters, but also so does theirs. So
Yeah.
I would kind of just let them do their thing, but like when it's too much, I feel like people kind of should put a limit on it. Just
Yeah.
because, like, saying that you're a pencil or something is just odd.
Yeah. There's a guy, Piers Morgan, and he's got people on his show, and it's very, very controversial. And they're talking about transgender, and they're talking about how people identify, how they define themselves.
Yeah.
And the big importance now is define yourself sexually. This. And the women on the show were saying, well, there's this identity, that identity, that identity. There's so many of them now. Different sexual identifications and other things. And Pierce says, well, okay, if I wake up tomorrow morning and I decide to define myself as a black lesbian,
Yeah.
I should be allowed to do that. But then the women on the show say, well, no, that's ridiculous. You can't do that. Well, why not? There's a guy out there that identifies himself as demon. I've seen
Yeah.
it. I heard him. He's like Marilyn Manson, but to another extreme.
Yeah.
And so now maybe you got young people, your kids,
Yeah.
because you're going to be a mother when you get older, right?
Yeah.
So then, how will you raise your kids in this society?
Well, I would want them to embrace their culture just like me, because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And for them to be who they are, but to tell them that, in my opinion, I would tell them that I think that there's only two genders, but you can think what you want
Yeah.
when you get older. You can take that into your own mindset.
Yeah.
But
And is there, and of course we're doing a lot of future projecting here. Is there an age at which you might maybe you have a child, a male that's very feminine in his way? Is there a point in time where you would say, hey, you're transgender, or would you? How do you get there? How do you? It's like there are. I mean, in the transgender community, the highest suicide rate.
yes,
And the bullying and the abuse that goes on and everything like
Yeah.
that, which is wrong.
it is.
On
Yeah,
any level, it's wrong.
of course. Yeah.
However, where would you start
Well,
to support them in that? What does that look like for you?
I would support my kid with anything that they choose, but especially at a more mature age, because a lot of little boys would like to play in princess dresses like their sisters or whatever.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they want to become a
And we
girl.
have a family member like that.
Exactly, we do. And I would just kind of see how it goes, but once they get to a mature age and they know what those things actually mean, I would let them decide.
Yeah.
And I would respect whatever they decide. If they do want to transition, I would let them, of course.
Yeah. And do you have a concept in mind for the age that takes place? Do they have to be able to be old enough to identify? Like, for example, I know young people that when this one in particular, and you know who I'm talking about here, won't mention any names, but when that person was 12, they basically came out of the closet and said, I think I'm bisexual.
Yeah.
And then that kind of, went in the gay pride parades and everything. And then further down the road, they ended up in a relationship with a man. And then, almost 3.5 years into that relationship, they were living together and everything.
Yeah.
And then just called me up and said, yeah, I think I'm gay.
Yeah.
This relationship no longer means what it means. And that was as that individual matured.
Yeah.
And as a father, I said, okay, I support you, whatever you've got going on.
Yeah.
Right. And there would never be any question. But I know this person didn't have that support and was told by other family members that, that's a sin. You can't be that way. But now I look at that journey and it's changed so much.
Yeah.
Right. And so you get to support. Now, how do you support that young person, say your child, when there's so much controversy around it? And they may change.
Yeah.
It may be back and forth.
I would tell them to just try to ignore what other people say and just listen to what you think is right. But I would also help them and support them and kind of correct them with things that they don't understand and stuff like that, because it's not like a sin or anything for that like stuff to be a thing or whatever. And I would just want my kid to be happy.
Yeah.
Especially I wouldn't want my kid to get bullied for something that they would want to identify, or if they wanted to date the same gender or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so say tomorrow you get to go to school and they say, such and such, we would like you to speak about gender identity.
Yeah.
What approach would you take to that? And I pretty much know already what it's going to be, but what would you do?
I would say there's only 2 genders.
And when people fire back that people should be allowed to be whatever gender they want, do you say, well, your gender stays the same, right? But who you identify as
is different. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, you could get up there and say, people can identify with kind of whatever they want.
Yeah.
Right?
A white person identifying as a black person, that's where my line draws, because a lot of people think that they can say the N-word or something like that, which brings a lot of disrespect to black people and my color skin.
Yeah.
So that's where I would draw the line, is especially in race.
Yeah. So, good point. But then people are going to say, well, wait a minute. If this person can identify as this gender, why don't they identify as this race?
Because genders aren't as worrying as races, because black people have gotten killed for no reason, and same with people who identify as they, thems, or are transgender, which is very sad. But I feel like genders is more like there is only 2 that you can technically be, but you identify as something that is one another or like something else.
Yeah.
But with race, I think that you only can really identify what is in your blood, because you can't just like if you're black, it's gonna show. Like you can't just change that about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, true. But that's something that really, that gets you going.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be something that as we move forward, how is that tolerance? Because you have a definitive view on it. It's male and female genders, and you're white, you're black, mocha, whichever, right? you can identify as certain things. However, if you're not black, you can't identify as,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So it makes it really interesting. And when I was a kid, when I was your age, man, there was never anything like that. Of course, I'm going to be 57 this year,
Yeah.
and I think back to the early 70s through the early 80s when I was going through school, and even going to university, and there was a very, very strong presence in the fine arts area
Yeah.
of that homosexual or gay population, right? Nobody thought anything of it.
Yeah.
Back then, like, nobody thought anything of it. And now I almost look at it and go like, man, oh man, with all the body shaming that goes on with all this
Yeah.
stuff and race, and now you have your gender, and people talk about gender equality, but now you've thrown everything else into it. I honestly, I mean, my heart goes out to you. I don't know how you guys do it and how you maintain your self-esteem, because there's another whole aspect of it. You look at where you were last year
Yeah.
to where you are this year, and obviously much more comfortable. There were times last year where you didn't even go to school because of what was going on,
Yeah.
and you were almost sick with the stress of it.
Yeah.
And then now you found your own personal power, but the power you actually found was actually physical as well as mental.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before, the biggest thing was the physical aspect of it, because you were able to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to find that there's a lot of people, unfortunately, that aren't able
Yeah.
to stand up for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, going back to the whole, if you get to stand up on stage and talk about these things, what would you say to other people who are mixed race? And it's funny, we talk about race, but really, we're all the human race.
Yeah.
And people mistake color for race and things like that, but it's what we have to work with. What would your advice be?
To push for your color of skin, that you should be treated the same way as a white person would be treated. That your skin color should not matter in a person's eyes,
Yeah.
as like bullying, as far as it goes to hurting someone physically. Black and mocha people and white people, they all get treated so much more different. Especially, like, even now, like, it still happens, obviously, where white people just get way more respect. And then mocha and black people just get disrespect for no reason. So I would say that try your very best to have power in your voice, no matter if there's 10 haters and there's only one of you.
Yeah.
Because fight for what you want to be known as.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, like, your color.
Yeah. And I know that you and your mom have had extensive conversations about it. And, you have a definitive timeline. You were 11 when this all came out.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what would you say to somebody who was in your position last year and you knew about it?
I would say to not give up. Because I felt like giving up so many times, and I did.
Yeah.
I just sat there, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I say push yourself, and just try your best to just fight the people off, and to ignore them, especially, and just to block them, whatever. Because you want to just get them out of your life, because they don't matter. You have to realize that they just don't matter.
True. Very true, and I love that perspective. Are you comfortable sharing some of the mental health issues that you went through, the byproduct of that bullying?
Sure. I went through really bad anxiety and depression, and I was suicidal, which was really hard for me. Really hard, because a lot of people didn't understand what was going on.
It's hard for all of us, right?
Yeah, and I just felt so lonely, and I just didn't know what to do. I was just so
And there were the other things too, right?
Yeah, I did hurt myself, which now a lot of people think that it's funny to make fun of. Especially,
like cutting, right?
Yeah, especially they'll call you emo if you cut or something. And that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Because that is so not okay.
Yeah. What's an emo?
Emo is someone who's just wears all black and someone who's like dark and listens to sad music or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I get if like you shouldn't be like hurting yourself in front of people or trying to get it for attention, but if that
Yeah.
person's doing it because they're in pain, that's like way more serious. And
Yeah.
same with suicide and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. What support did you get through school that really helped? I know there was stuff that your mom was doing, and
Yeah.
we were all there 100%.
Yeah.
But what was that help? What did that look like, and what was that turning point? Do you remember what that was?
I think that everyone's just telling me not to give up and trying to heal, but especially because I do really have he's kind of like a counselor, but not really in my
Yeah.
school, which helped me a lot too.
And who's that? And without mentioning the name, but
Yeah.
describe him.
He's black, so
Yeah.
it really helped because he understood what like was happening and stuff
Yeah.
more. I feel like, and he was just very helpful because, and he's a father too. So he's kind of like, since my dad lives far away, unfortunately,
Yeah.
he is kind of like a father figure to me at school,
Yeah.
which is really amazing.
Yeah. And that's good. And that's, and we talk about that, and that's, almost, that's your community,
Yeah.
right? And we can look at, if we had a great community, there would be tolerance of all the different genders.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe when kids are born, maybe they wouldn't be, and this is what my friend said yesterday. She said, well, why do you have to be male or female? Like, why do you have to be raised as a boy?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you have to, like, in some, like, I believe it's in Chinese, there isn't a word that defines male or female, boyfriend, girlfriend,
Yeah.
right? And I wish I could remember that. And of course, somebody's going to put a comment in here and say, well, that's wrong, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Now, I think, moving forward, and you still have this really, really strong relationship with this teacher who is like a counselor but not a counselor
Yeah.
for you. Moving forward, how important is that for yourself, and then for other African American or African Chinese or Mocha people that come into the school?
I feel like having him there as like the only black person,
Yeah.
as a teacher, like in the school, I feel like it does help a lot of color people, just so, because sometimes you feel like your teachers like hate you just because of your skin color, but really they don't.
Really?
But sometimes you feel that way,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just them thinking that because people look at them because they're
Yeah.
just so noticeable. And I just try to tell them that sometimes people just look at you because you're beautiful. Your skin,
Yeah.
they wish they had it.
Yeah. Do you remember now? There are people that I don't have in my life anymore, because I remember when you were little, and it was when we had a lot of the Syrian refugees coming in, and you and I were at a park, Henderson Lake it was actually, and this friend of mine
Yeah.
was there with her granddaughter. Now she's white, and her granddaughter is white as white can be. And I didn't realize how racist she was until she was looking at you on the swing, but there were other black people there.
Yeah.
And she had this look of disgust on her face because you had been let into the country or something like that. And I just about lost it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have no room in my life for that person. And
Yeah.
and I said, that's really disrespectful, because that's my granddaughter,
Yeah.
right? And it was insane,
Yeah.
absolutely insane. And I that person had moved away, and that person's now back in Lethbridge, and I see that person at the gym that I go to,
Oh wow.
and I say hi, but then I just ignore, and I'm showing my intolerance that way. That's her perspective, but I have no time for that.
Yeah.
I always think there's a lot of work to be done, and I think if we get too, absorbed in the negative side of things, we can't really get that work done.
Yeah.
Okay. Any words of advice for people listening to this? And I may put this out in one piece. I may break it down, but I think what's going to happen is I'm just going to put it out there in one piece. So what would your advice be?
Stick up for yourself and don't listen to others because they're just jealous. And some people just don't know what's going on and they just want to try to be smart. So just stick up for yourself and never give up.
Yeah. That's fantastic. You know what? I really appreciate the time that you spent here, and I appreciate your courage in making this happen. Now, we're going to listen to this over again. We're going to talk about it. We're going to have, your mom go through it. She's kind of in the background listening, and we'll figure it out from there.
Okay.
And my hope is that we can put this out there and we can get people in the educational institutions to listen to it, to accept your viewpoint on these things and allow that to move forward as, here's what a 10 or 11 or 12 or 13, 14-year-old believes to be true about the world that he or she or they live in.
Yeah.
And we should be in a position to accept it. Because I tell you right now, there are going to be people going like, why did you do that podcast? Why? And I'll say, because it's not about you. It is about this young woman sharing her perspective. And you should respect that perspective.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
100%. All right, guys, thanks for coming along on this journey. This is the Out of the Box podcast talking about gender identity and racism. I hope you've taken this to heart. I hope you share this too, because there's an important message here of tolerance and the all-important message of knowing who you are and having that identity and then commanding respect for it. Okay? Catch up with you guys soon.